Here's an image of what the two satellites that are launching tonight look like. These are what Galileo satellites look like, stacked atop one another as they went through some testing. Both SpaceX and the European Commission, though, have been fairly quiet about this mission as we were leading up to it. Not a whole lot being said by ESA or the European Commission. And in fact, this launch, unlike launches of the past, is going to be fairly truncated. Similar to, if you recall, National Reconnaissance Office launches where we don't actually see payload deployment and we don't see the payloads on board. We may not get a visual on this spacecraft here as well, though we'll be keeping an eye out for it. According to SpaceX's public launch page, its launch timeline notes that their broadcast will end shortly after fairing deployment, so we'll have to see if we're actually going to get onboard camera views of the Galileo satellites, but we may not see payload deployment. The last time Galileo satellites launched, it was on a Russian Soyuz medium launch vehicle. That launch timeline was about 3 hours and 47 minutes from liftoff to satellite deployment, heading into a medium Earth orbit, same as these satellites here are today. Here's another image of the Galileo satellites going through some vibration tests here. A shake table similar to actually the one that my colleague and Adam and I got to see up in Sandusky, Ohio, with the Dream Chaser on board. That vehicle looking to launch on a ULA Vulcan rocket later this year. There's one more image for you of a Galileo satellite with a little bit of added visualization from the European Space Agency, those blue lines there. Again, here's the launch timeline that we're looking at. The Falcon 9, again, set to lift off at 8:34 p.m. Eastern, assuming the weather is good enough for SpaceX to launch tonight. About a minute 14 seconds after liftoff, the vehicle will pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. T plus 2 minutes and 45 seconds. We'll begin a series of events in rapid succession. Will be first stage management cutoff to kick it off at T plus 2 minutes 45 seconds, followed a few seconds later by stage separation. Then that upper stage engine, the Merlin vacuum engine, will ignite at T plus 2 minutes 55 seconds. And again, the last milestone that SpaceX has disclosed, payload fairing jettison at T plus 3 minutes and 39 seconds. Again, these satellites will be heading up into medium Earth orbit. And not much disclosed about that before now. Taking a look here at a couple of different views of the Falcon 9 rocket. The so-called big vent is underway. Good visual indication that fueling is on time. Again, this big vent is the process of them chilling the feed lines before they begin loading liquid oxygen on board the second stage of the Falcon 9. Process should wrap up at about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds, so we've got a little less than 2 minutes to go on this event. As of 2021, the last time Galileo satellites launched, there were about 2.3 billion users of this type of global positioning system, or their version of the GPS. According to ESA Director General Josef Arspacher, the full constellation of these satellites will be 38 in total. To date, there have been 28 launched, 20 are still in service, 8 are in some state of non-use. We're T-minus 16 minutes, 41 seconds and counting, about 20 seconds left here on the big vent. Less than 40 seconds until second stage LOX load begins. There you see the big vent wrapping up. We're now at T-minus 15 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Coming up on 30 seconds into the process of liquid oxygen load on the Falcon 9's second stage. This is the last bit of fueling that is just now getting underway. Again, taking a look at the second stage of the Falcon 9, you see that gray band at the base of the Falcon 9's second stage. This is important protection for the RP1 or the rocket grade kerosene to prevent it from freezing. Again, this gray band is used when there are particularly long coast phases of the Falcon 9 upper stage. This mission heading to a medium Earth orbit. We're now T-minus 13 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. I want to thank the more than 23,000, creeping upon 24,000 of you watching with us live, and to those who may be tangentially watching. Really appreciate you being with us tonight. Hope you're all having a wonderful evening. If you're just now joining us, I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter here for Spaceflight Now, and you're watching our live launch coverage in progress of the 12th orbital launch of Galileo satellites, Europe's answer to America's GPS constellation. Similar to global positioning networks used around the world and from countries as well as the US, like China and Russia. Taking a look at the live chat, want to briefly thank a few folks for your support this evening. Thanks to Jay Leon for a $2 Australian super chat. Thank you so much. Brittany Evanson for $2 or $4 as well. Thank you. Catherine Driscoll for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate your support. Thanks to channel member Rocket Profit for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity. And to our newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. As a reminder, channel membership allows you to watch the liftoff of this mission in stunning 4K. Discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, and access to member-only videos here on YouTube. In response to Robert H. with a $10 super chat asking, is the Falcon 9's trajectory up the United States East Coast going north? Yes, it is a northeasterly trajectory, so if you are in Central Florida on up through about the Carolinas, if visibility is good enough, you may be able to catch a view of the Falcon 9 tonight, flying in an expendable version. Set to lift off in just about 11.5 minutes. And with this particular Falcon 9 first stage booster goes with it the history that it has amassed. So let's take a moment, step back in time, and talk about the flight history of one of SpaceX's soon-to-be tied as a launch leader on its final flight. This is booster tail number 1060 in the SpaceX fleet, first launching back on June 30th, 2020. Ironically enough, with another global positioning satellite, the GPS III space vehicle number 3. As part of the US GPS constellation. These satellites built by Lockheed Martin. They're also named after famous explorers. This satellite series is. This particular satellite, which lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 with the booster landing on the drone ship Just Read the Instructions. That GPS satellite was nicknamed Matthew Henson, named for the famous Black explorer who was a part of the Perry expeditions. This next Falcon 9 booster launched on September 3rd of 2020 on its first Starlink flight, lifting off from the same pad it's sitting at right now, Launch Complex 39A, landing on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You, which is now stationed over in California. Next up was another batch of Starlink satellites on October 24th, 2020, landing on Just Read the Instructions, lifting off from pad 40. Next up, a communications satellite for Turksat, the Turksat 5A, launching on January 8th of 2021. That was followed by another batch of Starlink satellites, L18 on February 4th, L22 on March 24th, L24 on April 29th. Its first rideshare mission came up with the Transporter 2 launch on June 30th of 2021, and this was the first time this booster landed back on land over at Landing Zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Launch number 9, another batch of Starlink satellites, 4-3 on December 2nd of 2021. Moving on to January 19th. Typo there, it should be 2023. There's a Starlink 4-6 mission. Sorry, not a typo. That was just me misreading. Apologies. Starlink 4-9 coming up on March 3rd of 2022. That was followed up by Starlink 4-14 on April 21st. Starlink 4-19 on June 17th. And part of the Galaxy constellation refresh, the Galaxy 33 and 34 satellites lifting off on October 8th, 2022. Now the rideshare mission followed that, Transporter 6 on January 3rd of last year, lifting off from Pad 40, landing back at landing zone 1. Followed up by some more Starlink satellites here in a row, Starlink 5-15 on July 16th, Starlink 6-18 on September 24th. And then the last time it launched a customer payload, that was Intuitive Machines Nova C lander named Odysseus, aka Odie. First American lander to return to the moon since Apollo 17 in the 70s. And most recently, Starlink 6-42 on March 24th of this year. And that brings us to today, the launch of these two Galileo satellites. And we are now at T-minus 7 minutes and counting. SpaceX is now performing a chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. Let's go ahead and talk about the Falcon 9 rocket before we get too much further in this mission. The Falcon 9 is SpaceX's flagship rocket. It stands at 70 meters, or 229 feet tall. We do have word from SpaceX that RP-1 load on the Falcon 9 first stage is complete. Falcon 9 also has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of it comprised of the first stage booster. Today's booster, as we just described, has launched 19 times, going for a record-tying 20th time on this flight. Designated 1060. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. And what you'll see in the image on the right, but not in the live pictures to its left, are those landing legs, since again, this first stage booster will be expended on this mission. Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. Again, a bit of difference from our normal Falcon flights. Most Falcon 9 rockets have those hypersonic grid fins, which are titanium winglets providing stability and steering, as a Falcon 9 would normally come back through the atmosphere to land on a drone ship or at a landing zone. But again, with this being an expendable Falcon 9, there are no grid fins on this booster. And they are pressurizing for strong back retraction here at the pad. The clamp arms will open up and retract, and the transporter rector will recline about 1.5 degrees from the vehicle. At the top of the inner stage here are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. The first stage main engine cutoff. High pressure helium is used to release those lashes, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Do have word strong back retract is in motion. Second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, it's powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space and will be put to quite a bit of use on today's mission, again as indicated by that gray band. The upper stage produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. Burns the same propellant mix, kerosene and liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. Following completion of this mission, SpaceX will likely perform a deorbit burn to drive it back into the atmosphere. The upper stage will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating space debris on this flight. You can see a little bit of motion there on the strong back as it is pulling back in the strong back retract sequence. Payload fairings at the top of the rocket contain the 2 Galileo satellites. They're made up of a carbon composite material standing 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. As we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, these fairing halves will be recovered a little further down range from where we showed you on the map. They'll be scooped up by the recovery vessel Doug and brought back to Port Canaveral, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. We do have word that Stage 1 LOXOD is complete, and the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with just about done fueling. Fueling will wrap at about the 2-minute mark. Taking a look from some pad views here at SpaceX, we'll just note for a little bit of housekeeping. The countdown clock at the upper right-hand corner of the screen is in real time. The bottom of the screen coming in from SpaceX on a slight delay, so you'll see some events happening in real time on our feed and then from SpaceX in a slight delay, so just want to make sure you're aware of that discrepancy. We have word Stage 2 LOXOD is complete, and you're seeing the ground gas closeouts here from our camera views. We're now less than a minute away from the launch of the Galileo satellites. We're fairly certain our countdown clock is now in tune with a countdown, although there's some slight uncertainty, but we're fairly close here, about 30 seconds away. And we do have confirmation that we are go for launch. Coming up on about 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying 2 Galileo satellites to medium Earth orbit. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower, and for the first time, Galileo satellites for the European Commission are flying under the power of an American-built rocket. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin engines. We're now coming up on a minute into flight. All moving nominally with this mission so far. About to approach max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. And some great tracking views from our team here. This view from Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. Falcon 9 now supersonic, which means it is traveling faster than the speed of sound. as the vehicle is passing through max Q. We're now just about a minute away from a few different events coming up in rapid succession. MECO, or main engine cutoff, coming up at T plus 2 minutes and 45 seconds, followed by stage separation 3 seconds later, and then second stage engine starter SES1 at T plus 2 minutes and 55 seconds. Now 2 minutes into flight. They're now thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine, preparing it for its ignition. Some views from our tracking camera here at the press site from our Adam Bernstein. And this from Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. Less than 20 seconds now until MECO. And MECO. Stage separation. And SES1 second stage engine ignition. You're seeing those events now. A slight delay from the SpaceX feed. See that first stage booster falling away from the upper stage. And at the request of the European Commission, we are not getting upper stage views of the payload. You're looking here at the control room in Hawthorne, California. You'll hear a call out for fairing separation in about 30 seconds or so. Go ahead and try to listen in for that in just a second.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And with that call out from Mission Control, we have confirmation verbally, unfortunately not visually, of fairing separation. And because of the request of the European Commission, this will be the last bit that we see here from SpaceX as they wrap up this part of the mission, although given the timeline from past Galileo launches heading up to medium Earth orbit, and as we saw with the gray protective band on the Falcon 9 second stage, it'll be quite a long time before we get confirmation of deployment of the satellites for the Galileo constellation. Taking a look here, SpaceX actually providing a graphical representation of their launches and landings over the course of the years here. And as the cadence picks up, you can get a good indication of just how much things have increased over time. Again, taking a look now, we're in 2021, now 2022 on this timeline. You can see just beneath the launches icon the number of landings both for Dragon spacecraft as well as first stage boosters and the payload fairings. And as we saw, a representation of the legacy of the Falcon 9, SpaceX has noted that they are working towards qualifying their Falcon boosters and fairings to support 40 missions each, as SpaceX currently has now 2 boosters that have launched 20 times, and B-1016